When we look at your growth and everything you've been doing, how would you say that building an audience for you has really helped you cut through?
We've seen our online signups double. Every single business is a microcosm of demand and supply. So you've got the supply of whatever it is that you do. If the demand is fairly constant or mediocre, then you get the average price for that thing. If demand spikes, you actually get a higher volume of sales, and also you get the confidence to put prices up or to stop discounting. And that basically changes the whole thing, and you end up in this virtuous cycle of spiraling up.
I want people to understand that you create your own narrative and you can take yourself on whatever path you choose to take yourself on.
For most people, their brain is bombarded with social media and marketing campaigns and branding campaigns of all these other third parties that want you to have particular goals and understand the payoff of those goals. And the only one in your life who's not trying to influence your brain is you. That's crazy.
If there was one key skill this year that you think people need to develop to cut through the noise and to really push forward in 2024, what would that be to you? And we are back with the Frankie Lee podcast. And today I am bringing you this returning guest because I know how much of an impact he had on you last time out. Daniel Priestley, welcome to the podcast.
And it's really good to be back. And this time we're live as opposed to on Zoom.
Yeah, I think the Zoom one was powerful for a lot of people because I got so much feedback from it and it cut through so much noise for so many people. So it's good to get you on in person and just give people that real insight into what you've been doing, building ScoreApp and Dent and everything you've been doing this year. Let's just go straight into it, right? Because I know people know a lot of your backstory anyway, and we can cover it through the podcast. But if there was one key skill this year that you think people need to develop to cut through the noise and to really push forward in 2024, what would that be to you?
There's a couple of things that spring to mind. The first one obviously is AI because that's the big topic of the moment. But the thing that's really valuable at the moment is getting cut through with an audience, building an audience and getting that audience to respond, getting engagement. You can have the most unbelievably good product or service as an entrepreneur, but if you can't get that in front of eyeballs, unfortunately, it's dead in the water. Look at the founders that are doing the best at the moment. They're people who know how to engage audiences. So Ryan Reynolds, for example, celebrity turned key person of influence entrepreneur, has built several multi-hundred million and even billion-dollar companies now. I was recently on Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. He, is a social media influencer primarily, who then has used all of that to actually engage audiences, and he's built, I think he's got 40 companies that he's involved with now. So those who know how to build an audience and engage an audience, they've got multiple businesses, all fast growth, and those who are really good at everything else but not building an audience and not getting leads and not generating sales, unfortunately, it's all for nothing.
Would you say, how would you say that building an audience for you has really helped you cut through this last 12 months? Because obviously when we look at your growth and everything you've been doing, I would say that it's had a profound impact. Yeah,
well, I mean, even just today. So, we were reconnecting. We were talking about this episode that got 500,000 views in the last few days. And we've seen our online signups double. So we would normally get 120 people signing up to ScoreApp in a day. And now it's like 240, 250, 300. So when you can engage a bigger audience, everything goes to that next level. Ultimately, here's the funny thing. Every single business is a microcosm of demand and supply. So you've got the supply of whatever it is that you do. If the demand is fairly constant or mediocre, then you get the average price for that thing and not enough volume of sales. If demand spikes, you actually get a higher volume of sales, and also you get the confidence to put prices up or to stop discounting. And that basically changes the whole thing, and you end up in this virtuous cycle of spiraling up. So look, for me personally, I've always been pretty good with engaging audiences. That was my background. And it's allowed me to, currently I have 8 different companies. They're all fast growth companies. We're winning scale up awards, and we're top of our industry and all of those kind of things. And it's because we have a steady stream of people coming and working with us.
And when you have got that steady stream of people want to work with you all the time, you can select the kind of clients that you want to take on and be more picky with who you take on.
And then it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So, take like Harvard University. If they get 100,000 people applying and they've only got a few thousand spots, they can pick the people who are going to be successful no matter what they did. Based upon their criteria, if they can just simply ask some questions and then say, oh, well, we'll let you through. But it's like a lot of the people who end up going to Harvard, no matter what university they went to, they would have been the top of the class. They would have been super, super, super successful. So Harvard just has built a brand where they get the most people applying, or up until recently, and essentially they can then be picky and choosy, and then it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're the coolest nightclub, then the coolest people come to the nightclub, and you only let the cool people in, which makes you the coolest nightclub. So it then keeps looping and looping and looping.
So yeah, you create that loop, and then people just always want to be part of your ecosystem. One of the key things that me and you have always spoken about offline when we did our last podcast as well was productizing IP and how that could be used. I understood it when you told me about it and kind of thought about many different ways I could implement it in my business, but it was a real powerful lesson to me when we were in LA and we were sat in the reception of this beautiful hotel that we were at, and we were just having some breakfast together. And there was an e-commerce guy that had done really well on the internet. I don't know if you remember this.
I do, yeah.
And
the toothbrushes, I think he had.
Yeah, he had a real big toothbrush company. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but we were sat there, and this is where I saw it come into play and how other people could use it, especially this audience. You had a ScoreApp book, and you had the Key Person of Influence book, and you had them in your bag, so to speak. And you've obviously connected with this guy, started talking to him, he's talking to us, and then rather than giving a business card, rather than giving him something non-tangible or something that gets thrown away or lost, you gave him an app you told him about what you're doing with the scorecard app, which allowed you to a topic of conversation, and then you gave him a book to go away with. So he's got this book now. Now no one throws away a book.
No,
I just thought it was a real good way of using IP. And when I saw that, I've never stopped thinking about how you did that and how you unlocked that conversation. So could you just, sort of, for the benefit of everyone listening, could you just break down how you use IP to unlock these conversations?
Sure. So IP stands for intellectual property, and it has a legal definition, which is like if you go to a lawyer and talk about IP, they're going to talk about legal IP, so copyright and patents and all of that sort of stuff. The more loose definition of IP is just the stuff that you know that's valuable. So inside everyone's head, they know stuff. I always ask people this question. I say, have you done something in the past, let's say take the last 10 years, where you did something remarkable with a certain type of person and you got really great results, right? Like you did something special that we could talk about. Now, someone might say, oh, I helped my friend get a job, or I helped my school raise some money, or I took an Instagram account and doubled the following on that, or I had some content removed from the internet. And it's like, oh, do you remember how you did that? Oh, yeah, first we did this, then we did this, then we did this. So essentially, there's valuable IP around any interesting result that you got, right? So think about this as a sentence. I did something special with a certain type of person and we got an extraordinary result. So if you unpack that, something special is not everyone can do it. Certain type of person is there's a clear type of person who could benefit from that. And we got a remarkable result is there's a great result that other people would want as well. So if we unpack that, then we can say, well, what's the intellectual property? And the intellectual property is the methods, the steps, the stories, the analogies, the understandings, all of that kind of goes in and around it. So that starts to bubble up like a cloud of information. And what you want to do is capture it. So you could capture it through video, you could capture it on a podcast, or you could sit down and do a book. I've written 6 books, and essentially the reason I write books is because I'm trying to capture my intellectual property. It's like I wrote a book called Key Person of Influence, and it was about I'd spent 10 years working with the personal brands of CEOs, founders, investors, all these kind of people who had to, for the first time ever have a personal brand. I'd learnt a lot in that process, so I wrote it all down, wrote a book, and it's become a great book. I learned a lot about how to do scorecard marketing campaigns. Very few people know about that. So I wrote a book called Scorecard Marketing that allows me to own the concept, unpack my IP, put it all in one place. If I'm not having a particularly good day, let's say I'm not feeling well, Well, it doesn't matter. The IP is already captured in one place that is always perfectly on point. So I just give out a book. And to kind of round it out how we use that, when we wanted to scale up ScoreApp, one of the first things we did is printed 10,000 copies of this book, and we sponsored all these different events, and when everyone at the event got a book in their goodie bag, it probably cost us about 30 or 40,000 pounds to do that activity, and it can be linked to about 30 to 40,000 pounds a month worth of subscription. So imagine that you spend 40 grand printing books, and then it brings in 40 grand per month, right? Because people read the book and they go, oh, now I understand the strategy. I want to implement the strategy. So I see a lot of people who are super smart, they're super bright, they've got great intellectual property, but they've not formalized it, they've not packaged it, they've not productized it, and that, that's a huge opportunity for them.
Let's run it through a few scenarios just so that people can see how it's implemented. Let's go for a gym owner. Generic gym owner wants to stand out in the marketplace. How would they stand out using this way of capturing IP?
So start with some things like case studies and success stories. So if you go back over the last 3 years, who are your standout case studies? Who are the people who got an incredible result that everyone wants to replicate? That would be a good starting point. You would also go to the key questions you always get asked. So when people come and ask you, when you tell someone, I own a gym, and they say, oh, tell me, can you answer this question? Can you answer this question? Tell me the answer to this. So this is all the stuff that people want to know, but you know the answer to, you take it for granted, but lots of people don't know the answer and they want to know it. So you start capturing all of that. Now, what I like to do is put it into a bit of a format. The best format, I think, is a book, right? It doesn't have to be a big book. This book's only 20,000 words. My other books tend to be 40 to 60,000 words, but I kept this one short. But it doesn't have to be long, but I like to look at what are some of the key insights or understandings that people want. What are the key methodologies that people want to, or that you think people should follow? What are the objection handling steps? So if someone has objections to doing the right things, how do you handle those objections? What are the mindset shifts or reframes that are required? What are the stories or data or research that should go in there? And when you start putting that all together in a book plan, now you basically have the backbone for your intellectual property, and then you add the color to it. You write it out, you tell the stories, you put in the research. So all of that goes in, and now essentially you've got a book. We've worked with many personal trainers, fitness trainers, gym owners to help them to do this, and their businesses explode, and they explode beyond the geographical borders of the gym. So when you take a gym, it normally only can take on clients who are 10, 15, 20 minutes walk away, because that's kind of how people are. They don't want to walk more than 20 minutes to the gym. But once you have a book and people are reading that book, you can have customers all over the world who buy the book. The book can link to an online course. So you read the book and then take the course. Now you've got people spending money all over the world. Maybe you could build an app. Maybe you could take an equity stake in other people's gyms. Maybe other people's gyms might want to buy your book and give it away to their members. So now you've got something that scales well beyond the borders of your gym.
And obviously you put your name down as the author of this book, but even though you've got your name on all these books that you've written, I presume that if you sold the business, you sell the IP with the business?
Yeah, you absolutely can. So in this case, if we sold ScoreApp, this book, the rights to this book would go with the business, yeah. So I would forfeit my rights to get future royalties or any of that sort of stuff, and they would own the future royalties, and they'd own the print publication rights.
When you put intellectual property like a book with a software company like ScoreApp, what does that do to the kind of price that you can fetch for on exit? Does that increase the price for a dramatic amount because you've already built in marketing into the sale of the business?
Spot on. So what is it that people are buying when they buy a business? They mostly buy three things. The primary thing is the intellectual property, the actual asset of the business. All of the stuff that's easy to replicate. Why would someone pay a premium for that? Why wouldn't they just copy it? So the hard stuff is the intellectual property, like books and videos and content and methodologies and frameworks and all that sort of stuff. So they want to buy the intellectual property. They typically then want to buy the recurring revenue associated with that intellectual property, and they want to buy the team of people who know how to operate that business. So those are the three things that make up a business sale. When you're selling a business, if you want to get someone who wants to pay for it, you've got to convince them we've got intellectual property, we've got recurring revenue that's going to keep going, and we've got a great team who can run this business into the future. Those three things, you've got yourself a business sale. So the more you can just get everything that's in your head into a productized format, essentially the more the business is ticking one of those major boxes.
How are you implementing that into something like an e-commerce brand that's selling products online? Because I think if you could find a way to do it, I think it would add a lot of value and stand you out from a lot of e-commerce brands that get sold, and they're just being sold on the fact of like, okay, we sell this much online and we sell this much on Amazon. But how can you use this intellectual property to add value to an e-com brand?
Well, like a brokerage model business doesn't sell for much because essentially you don't own the product or the intellectual property. So imagine this. Imagine there's a e-commerce business, and all they do is they just have a range of products that they source them in Asia, they buy a bulk order, and then they sell them in Europe one at a time. So they might have some backpacks or something, and they buy them for £25 and they sell them for £75, and that's the business. And then you've got all your costs in the middle, but ultimately any buyer is going to go, well, why can't I just buy backpacks in Asia? Like there's nothing there. There's no brand, there's no intellectual property, there's no team or culture. So you're just what's called a brokerage model business. A brokerage model business is a really good business to get started with. It's a great cut your teeth business, but it's not a good business for eventually ending up in. You want to develop something that is your own thing. Here's another one. Imagine instead that you write a book all about the joy of camping in the wilderness, and it's all about like where to go and how to go camping, and it's all about like taking the family and doing some survival skills or any of that sort of stuff. And imagine that people love that book and it's got a brand to it, and let's call it Survival Camping Dads or whatever, and you kind of have a club associated. Now this is like standalone intellectual property. Now if you add an e-commerce store to that, where people love the brand, they love the content, and they're sticky to all the things that brand represents, now you can actually add some of the e-commerce products that are hand-selected products for people. You could bundle those up and create bundles, and now you've actually got something that has value, but it's also underpinned by this intellectual property. So it could be very similar products and services as before, but there's something to it that makes it a bit more saleable.
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying is just make sure that everything that you do in business can be underpinned by as much intellectual property as possible as you go. So it doesn't matter. Essentially, you're not saying that people could have zero right now, but just start building it, put a PDF together, put this together. Because when you look at like a successful social media influencer in fitness like Kelly Ritzines, where did she start? She put together a bikini body guide PDF and made 63 million out of that.
Wow.
So and that was the first thing that she started.
Productized her IP.
Productized her personal training in Adelaide into a book, and then sold it.
So like the first thing we talked about is building an audience and engaging the audience, and then productizing your intellectual property to give them something to buy. Now, yeah, I mean, essentially you're talking about the rules of business. These are the key things. If I was to buy any business and I wanted to increase the value to it, it's like all I need to do is start putting that IP around the business, and the business itself becomes a lot more valuable. So imagine I buy a business and I do 12 podcast episodes, and those are now, and I do them so that they're evergreen. You can use them however you like. And I create an ebook and a physical book, and I create a YouTube channel library. And I might formalize the culture and create a culture guide or a culture book so that all the things that we do as a team are actually documented somewhere. I might say, hey, this business needs a lead generation strategy, so I'll create an online scorecard that allows people to fill in the online scorecard and then become a lead for the sales team. Now, if I formalize a few of those things, that business, I could, maybe the business is worth 500 grand on day one. You start putting those things in place, and all things being equal, it will just be worth a little bit extra, a bit extra. Businesses are sold on a multiple of revenue or a multiple of profit. So let's say that business is making 150 grand and it sells for 4 times profit. If you put all those business assets around, it'll sell to 5 to 6 times profit just because there's more assets around it. So the same 150 grand worth of profit is seen to be more safe and secure and scalable and independent So that same revenue will actually produce a business that's worth quite a lot more.
When you're building ScoreApp and when you're starting this brand, do you think to yourself and reverse engineer who you could potentially sell that to?
Totally. Yeah, absolutely. I think every entrepreneur should begin with the end in mind. So there's two types of businesses. You have a lifestyle business or a performance business. A lifestyle business is deliberately built to give you fun, freedom, flexibility, cash flow. The goal is that you want to build a business you never want to sell. And a performance business is built to be a standalone, valuable business. You may not sell it, but it's built in such a way that it's totally saleable, and it's built to be a standalone business that has its own valuation. It can attract investors. It can attract debt, all of those sorts of things. It's kind of like if you're a property developer and you've got this block of land and you think to yourself, do I want to put a house on this that I want to live in, my dream home, or do I want to put 10-story apartment building on this and sell off those apartments and make a bunch of money? And it's like you can pick either, but you got to pick one. You got to pick a particular direction of travel.
The key insight I got from you last time was the way that you articulated how you'd read the data about the British Army and some of the structures that are used in the British Army and how you were using that to approach business. One of the things that you said to me was, Frankie, I wouldn't start a business with any less than 4 people, because if I start a business with any less than 4 people, it's not worth starting. It will fall over. So I start with 4, and when it gets to a certain point, I bring on another 2, and then I bring in another 2, and I bring in another 2, and that's how I stack it. And I stack it up to I think
it's 2, 4, 8, 30. So 2-person is a scout team.
Yeah.
Can we build it? Can we sell it? 4-person is a launch campaign team. 8-person is a stable lifestyle business, core team running a good little stable business. 30 is a platoon in the military, which is a business that can be sold. So normally most businesses that can actually be sold for proper money, they've got a team of 30 people. They normally have a 4 or 5-person executive team plus some teams doing things on the ground. From an investor's point of view or a acquirer's point of view, it's really nice to be able to acquire a business that has 30 people because it's not founder dependent. If one person leaves, they can be replaced. If 3 or 4 people leave, they can actually be replaced. Whereas once you've got a business that's less than 8, if 1 or 2 people leave, it can put a massive hole in that business. It could shut the business down potentially or begin a real spiral down. So 2, 4, 8, 30 is my model. I'm always saying if we've proven it at 2, we go to 4, 4 to go to 8, 8 we go to 30.
Do you have a set data point that they've got to hit to go from 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 4 to 6, 4 to 8, and all that kind of stuff? So
2 people, the job is to create like product market fit and to just basically get those early like a minimum viable product, right? Something that is like an online scorecard or quiz, and to essentially get people engaging with it, like a waiting list campaign, a scorecard campaign, a discussion group. So it's anything that kind of demonstrates there is a market for this, people want this, people are engaging with this, we can sell this and we can build this. Those are the 2 things. And those 2 people are like scientists. They're just conducting experiments, and we want them to do lots of fast and cheap experiments to find out what this business is all about. 4-person, the key thing here is that we're going to run a 6-figure campaign. So the goal is to make about 300 or 400 grand worth of sales. And it's about launch campaign. It's about running some big events, perhaps maybe doing some influencer marketing campaigns with a couple of influencers. But the goal is that the 4 people should be able to do sort of mid 6-figure revenue, but it doesn't feel sustainable. It feels exhausting because you're a bit stretched. You're a bit, you can't keep doing this forever. We can pull it out of the bag a few times, but ultimately we need to stabilize this business. So you're proving that you can get that product market fit and you can actually get those launch campaigns running. 8-person, I like to see it hit about $1 million of revenue at that point. So 8 people, 80 to 100 grand a month is a good benchmark with most businesses. And you want to have some key roles. You've got a key person of influence whose job is to expand the market and expand the audience. You've got a general manager or what's called an ops director who's running the business. The key person of influence should be out in the marketplace and they should barely pay any attention to how the business, in a perfect world, They're not thinking about how the business runs. They're thinking about engaging the biggest audiences that they can. The ops director is thinking about how the business runs, and they've got a marketing and sales division, they've got a admin division, and then they've got a client delivery or technology division. So there's those kind of like 7 people in that team plus the key person of influence. That's your 8. Essentially that's your, that's where that business becomes a 7-figure revenue unit. And our 30-person team is where we get to 10 million of revenue and 7 figures. So 8-figure revenue and 7-figure profit. That's the goal.
When I signed up to ScoreApp, I got an email from your co-founder, and I presume your co-founder is the technical one that sits within the business and looks after the business, and you're the one going out there, driving the sign-ups, putting the face out there, explaining the concept, articulating it to the marketplace, and bringing on the sign-ups over. And that's kind of how your roles are developed.
That's exactly it.
So with everyone that you partner with from here on in, are you more the face now and more of the front, the overarching thought process, and then everyone else is more of a technical lead that sits behind and kind of controls the company now?
Yeah, so that's exactly it. So my job is to be out there in the market, talking to more people, doing high-level introductions, talking about what we're doing, telling the stories. Essentially, we call this the key person of influence. All right, so front-facing driving force. And then I partner with people who are improving the product, building out the team, and essentially running a tight ship, running the business. And it's normally a few people. So like, for example, Dent Global, it's Glenn Carlson and Mike Reed, and a new person, Zara, right? So we've got a team of people and they're running that business. Central to my whole group of companies, I've got one CFO, Chief Financial Officer. So we've got 8 different companies in the group, and we've got a CFO who manages kind of like the finances of the companies. And then we've got myself as the key person of influence. And then each individual business has its own team who want to make sure that that product and that operation is running smoothly.
When we were in LA, we also had a conversation because I couldn't figure out why you were still in the UK. I didn't know why you hadn't gone to Dubai or you hadn't gone to America or somewhere else. I just couldn't understand it myself why you were here. But you said to me during that conversation, you're like, well, Frankie, with a limited company in the UK, you're perfectly positioned to get acquired because people like UK businesses. Yeah. I'd love you to expand on that statement and give the audience a bit of an insight into that and why you position yourself in the UK personally.
Well, so the issue that you have with going to Dubai is that in Dubai, it's a really great place to be earning income because there's no income tax. It's a great place if you want to run a business that just spits out a lot of cash and you're not looking to sell it. But it's very, very difficult to sell businesses in Dubai. It's a fairly new market. It has low levels of governance associated with it. And also, frankly, there are a lot of scams and those sorts of things associated with Dubai. There are people from all over the world there, running their crypto projects that will never do anything proper and all that sort of stuff. So when you go up a level to serious money and those companies that are going to spend tens of millions, hundreds of millions on an acquisition, they mostly want to buy US companies. And then outside of the US, they'll buy a Canadian company, they'll buy a British company, they might buy a German company, but they might worry about a language barrier. Sometimes they could buy a Australian business. But the vast majority of big acquisitions are US, and then it falls off a cliff, and then you've got Britain and a few of these kind of markets that still, there's a lot of M&A. So the UK, if you can't be in the US or you don't want to be in the US, Britain is a really good alternative because a British business will sell to a US business just fine. The other thing too is strategically, if you build a business in the UK, you're actually almost building a business in a walled garden that is away from the most aggressive market in the world. So the US is the most competitive, aggressive market in the world, and it's super expensive to get talent there. It's super expensive to get things done. It's super cutthroat around dealing with the service providers. Everyone in the US is an entrepreneur, and they're all fighting over value. So if you've got something of value, the lawyers are after you, the accountants are after you. They're very American about getting the slice of the pie, right? the UK is a little bit more friendly. It's a little bit more, it's less aggressive. Now, what you can do strategically is you can actually build a technology product in the UK, get some traction in a market that has 60 million people, then kind of expand into a bit of Western Europe, expand into a bit of Canada, expand into a bit of Australia, New Zealand. By the time you then pick up all of those bits of market and you've proven that this thing will scale, then the strategic exit is to sell to a US company that knows how to scale across the US. So you can sell to an American company that can handle the aggressive nature of the biggest market in the world and who can basically buy you for an amount that takes into consideration that the US market is where they're going to expand into. So it's a really cool strategy to build something outside and then sell in.
And do you think, though, that with everything that's happening in the UK market, it's quite a highly taxed environment? The government's getting more aggressive with businesses, especially like small to medium businesses are getting hammered, aren't they, right now? Do you kind of have to grow to a certain size here to be able to move in this market now?
Mind you, the US and the UK are similar tax environments. You know, like income tax is relatively high in UK, US, Canada, Australia. So essentially those top tier markets, they tax, you know, corporation taxes like 20 to 30% and income taxes like 20 to 50%. So they're all doing the same stuff. They're playing the same blueprint.
Yeah.
So essentially you start seeing it as very high tax environment if you're spending time in Dubai. You know, but you see it as a normal thing if you're US, UK, you know, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't particularly think they're wildly difficult it's not a wildly difficult market to operate in.
If you had your chance to start again and you didn't have the family and stuff and you were a single man and you could position yourself anywhere, where in the world would you position yourself now?
Well, I think in digital and I think in time zones. So I'm really just thinking about what are good time zones to be in. Yeah. And it's like I want to be on the same time zone as my talented team. So if I've got a lot of talent in, you know, Europe, then I need to be on a European time zone. Or if I've got a lot of talent in Asia, I need to, you know, be workable for that. If a lot of my market and my talent are in the US, then I need to be there. So I think in time zones first. And I think in internet speed, does this place have good, fast internet, which is less of a consideration now, especially with like Starlink. I mean, I totally get the value of Dubai, but also, and Dubai's time zone's amazing, by the way, because it kind of does straddle all of Europe and all of Asia. So it's got a lot going for it there. If my job was just to have a really high income and a really great lifestyle, Dubai's a great place to do it. The other thing too is you kind of, other than the country you were born in or the country you've spent the last 15, 20 years in, almost any country in the world has some sort of a visa at the moment that allows you to live and work there. You know, so it's not that you have to be in Dubai. You can kind of be in all sorts of places. You know, Spain has 6 years of no tax you don't pay tax on anything from outside of Spain. And I think Italy's got one, and you know, Estonia, and there's all sorts of different visas, provided you're earning your money digitally. So the strategy is that you just need to have a company that's set up somewhere else other than where you live, and you pay the income to that from that overseas company to. So like, for example, if you set up a British company, but then you live in Dubai and pay yourself a very high income, that works. You get a bit of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, my mate that sold an info product business, he was obviously set up in the UK and then lived out in Dubai. And that was why he got a £2 or £3 million exit on the company, because it was a UK company. He perhaps wouldn't have had the same exit if it had been a Dubai company. So I think what you're saying is generally true. Like, and I'd never thought about it like that until we'd discussed this. You know, you just don't think about that. You think, oh, a company can be sold anywhere, but it's not always the case, especially when you're in grey markets like that haven't got the mature banking system either. Mature
banking system, also the M&A system. So the accountants, the lawyers, you know, all of those sorts of things. The court system. In the UK, you've got hundreds of years worth of company law and corporate, you know, judgments and all that sort of stuff that are sitting in the UK. And ultimately, any decision goes to the Supreme Court, or it goes up and up and up. in the in the UAE, literally you can have decisions that go up and then have to be judged on by the ruler of the country. All right, so it doesn't have the same sort of court system, and it doesn't have the maturity of, that enforcement and all of those sorts of things. So, look, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with any of that, but when you're wanting to sell a company for 100 million plus, if that's one of your goals, you need to think about where would your acquirer be and what would they be comfortable with.
Is that one of your goals to sell a company?
Totally. Yeah.
What do you think ScoreApp is the company that's going to do?
It's on track for being worth over 100 million.
In what time frame?
In the next few years.
Yeah.
Yeah, like 2 years, 3 years.
So when you reverse engineer ScoreApp being worth 100 million, how many users does that have to be worth 100 million? At what price point?
So software as a service companies, they tend to be worth somewhere between 7 and 10 times their revenue as a general rule of thumb. So if we for easy maths, if we were to basically say a 10 million revenue gets you 100 million worth of valuation on a good day, maybe a 70 million valuation on a normal day, maybe a 60 or a 50 million valuation on a bad day. So it has to hit a minimum size. Normally, software companies have to hit about 10 million of revenue before they're taken seriously. Big companies, when they're conducting searches for acquisitions, they'll say, they'll have a board mandate that says, yeah, we can go looking at anything for, that has 10 million of revenue. Below 10 million of revenue, we don't want to look at it. So you need to be above that threshold, whatever the board mandate is. And it's either going to be 10 million, 25 million, 50 million, 100 million will be the typical mandates.
And I imagine something like ScoreApp is a perfect kind of thing that a HubSpot would buy or a ClickFunnels or something like that.
A lot of those big CRM businesses, they have figured out mathematically that they are better off charging a higher price to a lower number of clients, and it pisses off all the small end, right? So this is actually part of our exit strategy. But essentially, you take, let's say, HubSpot. It's about 500 to 1,000 a month to get the HubSpot thing working in your business. You're going to spend, sort of 5 to 10,000 a year on HubSpot, and that's kind of what their per client needs to look like to justify their valuation. Now, that means that they've got millions of people on their database who can't afford that because they're early stage businesses. So an acquisition of ScoreApp would be super smart, because then what they would do is they would have an on-ramp product that would go up to their main product. So they'd buy something that is for that smaller market, so that they're not missing out on all those people on their database. So that's called a strategic acquisition. A strategic acquisition is where you're buying something for a strategic reason, because it has a fit within your business. That 1 and 1 makes 11.
If you're someone who's listening to this who's got like a 3, 4, 5 million pound or dollar a year business that needs a certain skill within their business, like maybe a marketing department, would you be looking then to strategically acquire the marketing company to put in that now at that level, or would you be building your own?
I think at a certain level, you're better off doing acquisitions. So the good news is anything under 10 million essentially is completely up for negotiation how it gets sold. There's not really a cash buyer market for businesses under 10 million.
So it's vendor finance type.
Yeah, vendor finance, it's deals, it's all that sort of stuff.
Quick one for you guys. This podcast is sponsored by contentremover.com. As many of you are probably aware, I set up contentremover.com in 2017 to help people remove all forms of online content, and I've looked after some of the biggest names and brands in the world doing it, and I would love to help you if you're struggling. If you're struggling to remove images, videos, search results, fake accounts, or anything online, go to contentremover.com and we'll help you today.
When we talk about big checkbooks, right, where they come in and they buy stuff for cash, it's publicly listed company or private equity backed company. So the big checkbooks, they have to justify the big due diligence process and the grown-up accountants and lawyers and all that sort of stuff. So they can't buy anything that's under 10 million of revenue. It's just not worth it to them. You might hear occasionally that something happens for a strategic reason because someone invented a piece of technology or something. But by and large, they want to buy bigger. Bigger is better for them. They really want to do $100 million deals or $1 billion deals, right? That's the stuff that they're excited about because they've got the big checkbooks behind them. They can borrow the money. They've got private equity, or they've got, public markets. So they want to do those deals. Once we go under 10 million, it's the microeconomy. And this is where you can do something called a roll-up, where you roll together 3 or 4 businesses and bring them together so that they go over 10 million. You can do vendor finance, where you buy someone else's business, but the vendor, the seller, is the one who they don't lend you the money. They give you the business on a payment plan, effectively. So let's say you agree with them that their business is worth 1.5 million, and you say, we'll pay 300 grand for 5 years. So they give you a payment plan to pay off the value of the business, and it's secured against the business itself. So there's actually no security other than the business. So it's a really great, it's a great opportunity if you've already got a business doing 3 or 4 million to go and buy something that's doing a few million to get yourself closer to that 10 million mark. Super smart.
That's essentially what that company did that Stephen was involved with. Stephen Bartlett's Social Chain was valued at £8 million at the time.
Yep.
And it was rolled into Social Chain AG, which was the company that put it on the stock exchange, which was an e-commerce brand, and that was worth about 290 million euros.
Yeah.
And when they put them together, it was worth like 300 million.
Yeah.
And then they floated that on the German stock exchange, which got the valuation and got the exit, and then they all got paid out predicated on that.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a couple of other companies, I believe, that was rolled up into that. So that's how the
a lot of companies, I think there's over 20.
Yeah, that's how the valuations are achieved in the marketplace, isn't it?
Yep. So there's WPP, which is the biggest example of that. So essentially WPP is a marketing agency, publicly listed company group, and it's just hundreds, I think it's 100 plus different marketing agencies that are all marketing agencies that have rolled into one publicly listed company. So they all operate independently, but they are part of the WPP group. Now, this is called a roll-up, and a roll-up is essentially you take a fragmented group of companies that all kind of do similar things or adjacent things, and you roll them into one company. Now, individually, the companies are not worth very much, but collectively, they're at a scale that makes them valuable. So this is advanced business strategy, but it's perfectly valid.
Give me an insight into how you're building a defensive moat around ScoreApp so that you can take advantage of the acquisition before someone else comes in the marketplace and starts to dominate with a bigger budget.
So I wrote a book called 24 Assets. The more assets that you build, the more your business has a moat and it's valuable. And when you start building an ecosystem of assets where it's not just one thing, then your business is very hard to copy, hard to replicate. It's funny. You can kind of copy any one thing, but it's hard to copy a whole ton of things. So if I said to you, we're doing podcasts, we say, well, that's easy to copy. Anyone can do that. You say, we wrote a little book about it. Well, anyone can copy that as well. Okay, we create a YouTube channel with all the videos that happen. Well, anyone can copy that. We created 100 templates that are in our template library. Well, on its own, anyone could copy that. We built an AI builder, and anyone could copy that. And it's like, if you look at any individual thing, you say, well, that's easy to copy. But once you start putting a lot of those things in a coherent, like box and dice, the whole machine comes together, and it's like, okay, so there's template libraries, there's an AI builder, there's a quiz landing page builder. There is a revenue stream with high quality of earnings. There's a growth marketing plan that has multiple assets that are making that work. It's won several major awards. And it's like each of those individual things, if that's all you had to copy, you would say, okay, I could copy that. But once there's an entire ecosystem, it's very hard to copy the ecosystem.
So you're basically saying stack the ecosystem and make it an independent, like they can copy parts of it, they can copy features, but they can't go and copy the whole thing in a short period of time, which makes it cheaper to acquire you than it is to try and replicate you. And even if they do replicate you, they perhaps don't know the algorithm at the back end or the stuff that goes in to make it work like that.
And you've also, if you do it right, you create so much momentum that in the time that it takes to copy where you are today, you would already be 10 steps ahead, and they would get to where you were 10 steps ago, and then you've got another 10 steps to copy. So you're now a runaway train. And it's just too hard to copy, but it's too hard to copy because it's a moving thing. It's a ecosystem, plus it's a team that are in the habit of creating stuff.
Is that similar to what I think it was Google did with the AI team from OpenAI? They took the team, didn't they? Or was it Microsoft that took the team?
No, actually, Microsoft said this team has already come together. We are not going to be able to build a team internally that can operate as fast as these guys. So we'll just partner with them and get in like as much as possible. and actually will own as much as possible, partner as much as possible, because they've got such momentum around what they're doing that we need to jump on board as opposed to try and build.
Would there ever be a time that say another company that was doing something slightly aligned but not the same thing as ScoreApp, would there ever be a time where you would potentially partner with them, where you wouldn't sell to each other but you'd partner with them to grow to another level to both get acquired by the same company? Would that be something you're open to?
Yeah, totally. If there was a really great high quality software business that was kind of like non-competitive but adjacent, and let's say they were worth 50 million, we were worth 50 million at that point, and together we would be worth 120 million because of strategic reasons. Yeah, totally. That is actually an M&A strategy. There are M&A people who go and get pre-agreed contracts with a group of companies, and then they go and sell that to a large company that wants to buy a group. And so these businesses haven't actually sold, but they've signed letter of intent. And then you go to private equity and say, "Hey, I've packaged up a deal." Believe it or not, this is actually how the majority of money is made in the economy.
100%. I believe it, because I've spoken to so many high level people like yourself now that are in this world and that are on the point of selling companies, taking companies public, and all this kind of stuff. And that's where the real money is made, in those deals, in those handshakes and all that stuff. And I'm talking like millions of pounds is made in 5 minutes that way.
Totally. And if you imagine two triangles, there's a pyramid which is called the general economy, the economy that most humans interact with. And there's not a lot of money in it, especially down the base. And there's like tiniest little bits of trickled money around that. And then there's an inverted pyramid, which I'd call the financial economy. And that is just not many people and just tons and tons of money looking for a home. And there's only a tiny overlap. So once you actually reach the point where you are of value, there's too much money chasing too few businesses, and then you sport for choice. It's just we currently have two systems that don't really interact very well. There's the money system, and then there's the people system. And there's actually not a huge overlap between the two.
So for the people listening to this that are caught in that general system, that want to step into that upper echelon system that you talk about, how can you go about acquiring the skills and the insights so that you can transfer yourself from that triangle to the top triangle?
It's the same way that it's worked for hundreds and hundreds of years. You do an apprenticeship. So how does a blacksmith become a blacksmith? They become an apprentice blacksmith first. So what everyone has to do is become an apprentice. One of the things that's kind of disappeared at the moment, I think we've got generations of people who see the end result on Instagram and they just think they can jump straight there. And actually, you've got to be willing to do your apprenticeship. And that means that you weasel your way into an organization, ideally a small organization, a boutique, and you get yourself around a founder, and you get yourself around like a CFO, and you get yourself around an executive team. And you get closer and closer and closer to the action. As you before you can be a number one, you got to be a number 5, number 4, number 3, number 2, then number 1. The funny thing is that whenever you actually see a number 1 who's out there operating in the world, if you get close to them, they're surrounded by like 10 phenomenally talented people who make that all tick. And the truth is, it's like, why do you think that you can just skip past those 10 and be a number 1 when even those 10 people don't feel like they're ready to be a number 1? They see more value in sticking with the number 1 and getting there first. So the key is that, especially if you're young, like, earn more money, have more fun, learn more by being a number 5 or a number 6. Now, how do you be that? You don't want to join a corporate. You don't want to be in Goldman Sachs. You don't want to be in Merrill Lynch or any of those companies. What you want to do is try and find a boutique business that has less than, say, 50 people, and that you have access to meetings that most people don't get into. You get to see the whole business as a unit. You get to see the finances. You get a lot of transparency in small businesses. So you want to try and find a fast growth, award-winning, dynamic little like engine where you get to be part of the team that's tinkering with it, and you're figuring out what actually goes on. You're going to earn plenty of money. You're going to learn a lot, right? And you're actually going to be at arm's reach to founders and executives, who are going to teach you a lot. that is the key to then becoming very, very successful later in life. If you've worked with someone who's done a big thing, it's very easy for you to then raise money and all that sort of stuff. Actually, I'll give you some real life examples. I think I'm up to about 10 ex-employees who have left me and set up 7-figure businesses. There's 10 people who over the years have worked for me and then they've gone off and built multi-million pound businesses. I had 2 young guys who did 2 years on my team. Then they went off and started a company and sold it to private equity for 7 million, and they did it all in 2 years. So they did 2 years with me, and then they did 2 years of startup and then sold. And those guys did that before age 30.
And you can only get those insights where the organizational structure is flat.
Yeah.
You know, when it's flat, you can gain access to you in a flat structure, but you can't gain access to you if you're in like you say, a Merrill Lynch, where you got to go through tiers and tiers and tiers of people to get to someone.
Yeah. You're just in a big company. You're just going to be shoved in the corner, and they're going to say, "Oh, your job is that every day this data comes in, and you're going to do this thing with this data and produce this slide deck and this report, and now you're going to send off these emails to these people, and you don't even know what the broader strategy for that is. You're just like in a corner doing a thing, and you have no real access to anyone, and you can't impact, or you don't have any transparency around numbers or whether the campaign's succeeding or not, or how much your work is worth, any of that sort of stuff. In a small business, you get access to that. It's funny, the 2 guys who did that exit, they took me out to, one of them took me out to lunch after they did the exit and just basically said, we just learned exactly how to do it while working at Dent. And then, we learnt the strategies and we went off and did our thing. My old assistant went and took over his family business and grew it from $500,000 to $5 million. But he had been my executive assistant for a few years and had seen how I operate and seen what goes on behind the scenes, recognized that the family business wasn't doing any of that stuff, and then went and took the family business and 10x'd it. It's being around someone first, being a number 2 first, and then be a number 1.
What's been the mindset shift that's had to happen throughout your last 12, 24, or even 5 years to allow you to see the opportunities that you have now? Because obviously there's, when we're speaking throughout this podcast and throughout our last podcast, I can see that there must, in order to go from like your 10 to 100 grand a month to the mindset shift that allows you to talk about acquisitions, building assets, everything there's a big mindset shift in that. What is that mindset shift?
It happens on several different levels. There's the mindset shift. It's happening across levels. So at a very intangible level, at a kind of almost metaphysical level, there's always a version of you operating at your best, at your middle, and at your worst. Right? So I call this the reptile, the autopilot, and the visionary. So I bet you can relate to moments where you've had reptile moments, where you've been an absolute asshole, you've lashed out at someone, you've said the wrong thing, you've had to apologize later, and you think to yourself, why was I in such a mood? Why was I so bad, right? And in those moments, you kind of think the world's against you, and you kind of you don't see the bigger picture, and you run your mouth off. Have you ever had a moment like that?
I'm trying to stay out of this.
You're trying to stay out of it.
Yeah, no, I can see.
Do you know someone who's ever had a moment?
No. I think every person's had a moment. I've certainly done that many times.
Many times, right? So these are reptile moments, and then you've got autopilot moments where you're just coasting through life. You just the next thing and the next thing, and each week starts looking like the last one and the one before that, and then all the months start to blend into each other. And you're kind of always in the same places, and you're always talking to the same people, and you're always doing the same activities. And that's autopilot life. And then there's visionary mode. And sometimes this really comes out when you're on holiday, sitting by the pool, and you think, why don't I do this? Why haven't I called this person? And holy cow, actually, if I connect this person and this person, those 2 people should be talking together. I'd be helping create a lot of value if I did that. Why don't I try that? Why don't I refinance this? Why don't I see if I can access some funding and try this thing? So you're in this kind of what if space, and anything's possible. And you start spotting the connections and the dots. And it's almost like I call it almost being at 30,000 feet, where you're not weighed down by the realities of day to day. You almost have this high level view of how the world could be and the fact that there's just puzzle pieces and you can connect the puzzle pieces and make something that's worth more. So the first mindset shift is just recognizing, am I reptile, autopilot, or visionary most of the time? And if you're anything other than visionary, you've got to figure out how to be more visionary. You've got to actually read books, listen to podcasts, get around the right people, journal. You can do simple things. In every city, there is an amazing 5-star hotel, beautiful, like $1,500 a night plus. You can go and have a coffee in the foyer, right? You dress nicely, get your journal, you go into that foyer and you have a coffee there. Now, it's going to cost you £6 rather than £3 for the coffee, but you're now in a different environment. And you look around that room and you see people with $50,000 watches and handbags and all of that sort of stuff, and the environment's different and it's nicer. And suddenly it just has an impact on you. It lifts you a little bit and it makes you go, hey, why am I so stressed all the time? Why am I doing things this way? Suddenly it just kind of like elevates your thinking. It's weird. I actually find being physically high gives you an elevated view. So there are certain rooftop restaurants or rooftop gardens that you can go to where you actually have a high view of the city. And even that just changes your mental perspective about being in the, on the ground versus being elevated. Sometimes when I'm flying, I'm looking out over the city and it just gives me a different level of thinking. So you want to get yourself into different environments and try and be more of the visionary than the reptile or the autopilot, because that's the first mindset shift. And then beyond that, there's things like knowing the vocabulary, because every world has its own vocabulary, and that's one of the ways they protect that world. So they protect the value of that world by using silly words that make you feel inferior if you don't know what those words mean. So you've got to learn the vocabulary. You've got to be able to say, what is M&A, mergers and acquisitions? What is vendor financing? What is a term sheet? So you start to have to learn the vocabulary. Now, there's a lot of books that are kind of like the for dummies books that explain the vocabulary to you, which is cool. AI is really cool. So you could say to AI, tell me the 7 biggest concepts that I need to understand in order to understand how to sell a business. Break those concepts down. Tell me about concept number 1. What do I need to know about that? What terminology goes with that? So you can start having conversations with ChatGPT and you start learning stuff really rapidly. You can get audiobooks for the people who are the best of the best in that field, and they tell you about their biography and their, and their world. So, for example, if we know that most of the money's in private equity, listen to a dozen private equity related books, and within, a week, you've now got the vernacular and you've got the strategies and you've got the stories. There are literally the best private equity people in the world write biographies about all the deals they've done. There's a whole category of Amazon books about that. So if you say, I want to move in that world, start by reading absolutely every single book. Every one of those authors has also recorded videos that are on YouTube where they're being interviewed and asked the stories. So as you're reading the book, watch the YouTube videos between, read a few chapters, watch the podcast of that author, discussing what they did. So you can run down the rabbit hole. I'm old enough to remember, I'm only in early 40s, but I'm old enough to remember where there was no way to access those worlds. Those weren't available. Those book categories didn't exist. Those videos weren't. There were no such thing as YouTube videos. There were no such thing as podcasts. You didn't have access to that world. And yet today people whinge and complain, oh, it's not easier. It's like, how easy do you want it to be? It's okay for you. You've got this going for you. Okay, maybe, but also it's freely available. It's all laid out now.
I think even like Jeff Bezos letters to shareholders. Have you ever read that?
Yeah.
It's a whole, you can even buy it as a book.
You can buy it as a book. You can ask ChatGPT to summarize it.
It's amazing. And that is a powerful guide from someone who's built a company from a bookstore into, multiple categories and dominated multiple categories whilst acquiring things like nappies.com and whoever he acquired on the way to doing that because he wanted lost leaders. Whole Foods. Yeah, he's just literally acquired the whole lot as he's gone through, and he just documents the whole process for you.
It documents the whole process, and it gives you these little tools that they used along the way. Like one of the best tools for Amazon that is talked about is the future state press release. So the future state press release is every single project that Amazon wants to engage in. They write the press release of what they tell the press when it's done. So
that's powerful. Isn't
it's
it?
super
That's powerful.
So, for example, I might say ScoreApp just sold to HubSpot for 150 million. Daniel said this. The reason HubSpot bought it was this. So you actually create the press release as to what's going to happen in the future. It's
basically Jeff Bezos saying that manifestation exists, basically in a business way. Yeah. People may hate the word, but that's exactly what he's doing. He's saying, this is the outcome that I want to achieve with this. I'm showing you exactly what's going to happen. In the future, this is what you need to work towards, because this is where we're ending up.
And I've got friends who work in Amazon at a very senior level, and they do all these things all the time. They do the future press release. One of the things that he said is that it's really strange that when someone comes in with a future press release, it's always an aha moment in the team where they thought they were on the same page. They thought they were aligned to the same thing.
But they've missed something.
And it's when they do the future press release that they go, oh, now I get it. Now we're all aligned to this thing. Now that makes so much sense.
Yeah, I do this thing called an alchemy of self, and it came across my peer view many years ago by a guy called Sam Ovens. I never did it, but my mate William Brown said to me, you should do one of those. And I started to do one, and it's where you document how you want every area of your life to look, your health, your where you live in. You describe it in such detail. Like, it took me 8 weeks to fill out this. That's how much detail has gone into this. But it's all about setting out your statements, that your affirmations as well, of what you say and what you're trying to bring into your life. And when you read through this document and you start, you feel it, because you've spent so much time making this document, and it's the same way with your business. If you just took a little bit of forethought time and put that thought process into what you're trying to bring into your life, you'd get a hell of a lot further by documenting that.
A lot of times people think this stuff's woo-woo, but actually it's just how the brain works at a very much a basic scientific level. We know that essentially if you go out walking around the street and you've got nothing that you're looking for, and you get home and say, and if I was to ask you after a 20-minute walk, how many red cars did you see?
You're not going to know the answer.
I have no idea. If I say, go out for a 20-minute walk, for every red car that you can document on your phone, I'm going to give you $1,000. You're going to run around that neighborhood going, because you know what to look for and you know what the payoff is. So when you know what to look for and you know what the payoff is, suddenly you approach the world in a very different way. So when you create those kind of documents that you're describing, you're telling your brain what to look for and what the payoff would be. So you're giving your brain the two ingredients that it needs to turn life into a game, and to go, okay, so I'm on the lookout for these types of things. I know this will sound silly. I don't think I've told anyone this, but I'll reveal it. For many years, I had a podcast episode that I'd made for myself, only intended for me to listen to, and I'd got this dance track, and it was basically a 40-minute me talking to myself, and it was my walking track. And I basically would go on a walk for 40 minutes, and this track of my own voice would tell me, this is what we're working towards, this is what we're doing, this is the type of, these are the goals, these are the outcomes, this is the stuff. And it was to a really cool dance track, an instrumental kind of beat. And it was funny. There's something about your own voice in your ears.
Yeah.
It's almost like your brain, because it's your voice, your brain is really taking it in and it's really accepting, oh, well, it must be the truth. So I kind of brainwashed myself with my own voice for years with these couple of tracks that I had. But, I used to probably walk to that 4 times a week.
I believe how powerful that is, because I did a breathwork session where the full hour and a half, someone had cut up clips of all the motivational stuff I'd said about the podcast throughout my podcast and played that over like Hans Zimmer. And I did a breathwork session to it for like an hour and a half. And that breathwork session changed my life because it's my own voice speaking to me. Like, everything that I want is all that I've spoken through hundreds of episodes is in this track speaking to me, laid over Hans Zimmer playing in the background, like cornfields and all that kind of stuff. Like, it was powerful. And it just,
have you still got it?
I've still got it on me. My
Have
thing.
you only watched it once?
Yeah,
You should do it.
No, actually, because the Hans Zimmer tracks are separate to the thing. So that's playing on a speaker whilst this is speaking over the top, and it's powerful. But I even thought about when you're talking about productizing IP, I think that would not only be powerful for me, but powerful for this audience as well. Like I was thinking about creating like meditations for it and all that motivational stuff, because I feel like when I listened to my own voice, it was powerful, it cut through the noise. I don't know whether that would just happen for me or whether it would happen for other people, but it was just, I know how profound it is, because when I was speaking to you earlier about William Brown selling his company, he used to wake up every morning and his voice note on the alarm was him speaking his self-alchemy document out. So like, and everything he was going to do. Think
about like this, social media, it learns about who you are and it reminds you hundreds of times a day about what its agenda is. Right? It gives you reminders and alerts saying, I want you to check this, I want you to do this, I want you to do this. So it's got a goal and it's got a payoff. And then there are hundreds of brands that want you to spend money on their brand, so they remind you constantly, hey, this is what I want you to buy and this is the payoff. You're right? So it's giving you a goal and it's telling you what the payoff of that goal is. And they're constantly reminding you. And the only one not doing that to your brain is you, right? So for most people, their brain is bombarded with social media and marketing campaigns and branding campaigns of all these other third parties that want you to have particular goals and understand the payoff of those goals. And the only one in your life who's not trying to influence your brain is you. That's crazy. So even though it sounds really naff, what you and I are discussing right now, this cheesy idea that you record yourself some voice track, and I bet a bunch of people are going to say in the comments that's cheesy. But it's like, we live in a world that's so distracting that the human brain was never built for. It was, we have a brain that was built for basically finding berries and a partner and a mate, right? And then dying at 30, right? That historically, that's what the brain was made to do. And it's like now we live in this super complicated, different world. If you want to make the most of this crazy reality, you've got to come up with some ways of marketing to yourself. You've got to come up with the branding campaign of, hey, this is the marketing and branding campaign of what I want you to end up as. And if you don't do that, then you're basically the victim of someone else's campaign. Well, this is what I want people to understand. I want people to understand that you create your own narrative, and you can take yourself on whatever path you choose to take yourself on. And wouldn't it be prudent then to take yourself along a path that you wanted to go along, that was your ultimate dream, your ultimate vision? Wouldn't it be nice that every day you got to listen to that path and how that path presents? And that's all we're essentially saying. And it may or may not happen, but there's a good chance of noticing. If there's something going on, there's a good chance of noticing that there's a good chance of seeing the red car if you're knowing you're looking for the red car. If your brain knows, oh, okay, you want to learn more about M&A, oh, suddenly a book shows up on your feed. It's like, oh, you want to learn more about building a brand or building personal brand. Oh, wait a second, I just saw some videos that helped me to achieve that goal. So stuff just starts to get noticed a little bit differently. Well, anything you make your subconscious aware of, it will go and find for you. So if you say that you want to build and exit a company, and you start making your subconscious mind aware of that, it's going to look for things in your external environment that it wasn't looking for before. It was previously looking for a Greg's Bakery. It's not looking for that anymore. It's looking for like, who can I speak to build a company? Who can I speak to about M&A? Who can I speak to about acquiring this? Who can I speak to about building assets? It's a different conversation, isn't it? Yeah. Here's something weird. Have you ever been in a crowded room or a busy room, and out of the corner of your ear, you hear your name being mentioned? Yeah. Have you had that happen? Yeah. And it may, it's like someone's mentioning my name, or mentioning even a friend's name, a person that I know. It's like, oh, that person, they mentioned Gary V. It's like, oh, wait a second, I know. What are they talking about? So for that to happen, your brain has had to be listening to every single conversation and in real time filtering it out, except for, you just said my name, or you said someone I know's name. It's like, boom, boom, boom. Oh, I'll filter that in. But in order for it to filter it in, it must have heard everything. It must have heard every single conversation in the room. And it's discerned what it would pick up. So what we're talking about here is talking about educating your mind on what you want it to pick up in that massive noise, because we're all exposed to so much noise now that
it's you know, you got social media.
Tune into the thing
the more you position it this way, you can tune into what you want and get what you actually want, or get closer to what you want. And even if it doesn't lead you down the exact path that you thought it would, it's still going to open a vast amount more doors that lead you to a better place, isn't it? One of the things that really inspires me about you is the fact you've seemed to have got it nailed on in terms of like relationships and what you wanted from your life really early doors. There's a lot of men, a lot of women out there that, you know, they might have gone down the dating culture that's being talked about now in openly, and you know, we're meant to have 3 partners and all this other stuff, but you got dialed in real early. You knew what you wanted and you went out and got it. How did you know to go and get that, and how did you know that was right for you, and how have you built this relationship so that you can go out and pursue your greatest self?
Yeah, so I went through a dating phase, and I dated, you know, I had several relationships that didn't work out, that were like 1 to 3 year relationships. So that was partially discovering for example, discovering what I thought would be amazing, but actually turns out it wasn't. You know, so dating someone who I'm highly attractive to their look, but then there's not a lot of personality chemistry going on, and then we're not connected. And then you realize, oh, wait a second, that's not ideal. That's not what you want either. And then you go for someone who, you know, who's a lot like you, and you have really similar values and really similar beliefs and really similar outlook on life. And then you go, oh, wait a second, that's too hard to work that as well. Like that, they're because they're like me, they're not complementary. They're kind of almost a little bit competitive. So you kind of like, you know, for me, you know, it's a little bit of the Goldilocks and the 3 bears. This one's a little too hot, and this one's a little too cold, and this one's just right. So I did go through a process of figuring out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. I also consciously chose mentors in my life who had great relationships. So I exposed myself deliberately to being around couples that had been together for 20, 30, 40 years, that had families and kids, and that they had big Christmases together where everyone comes to their big family home. And, you know, because I just thought I want that. So I want to see what it looks like behind the scenes. You know, so I got my, you know, I made a decision that I didn't really want to be mentored properly by someone unless they had the family unit as well. And that I made a decision I wanted to read books and biographies about people who had a great business but also a good health and good family. So tuning into that, my little track that I talked about before had all of that based in on it. So what happened is I met my wife, my now wife. We ended up having a 13, she was very gorgeous when she walked in the room, and we ended up talking, and we ended up agreeing to catch up for a 1 hour chat, coffee and a walk. And we ended up talking for 13 hours, and it was like, wow, this is a really great conversation. But also within the first week of connecting, we talked about, hey, what do you want out of life? Like, I want kids and I want family. These are my values. These are the sorts of things. This is the type of relationship that you know I'm looking for. So good conversation about that. I couldn't have had that conversation with many people. I think most people I would have had a date with wouldn't have had that, but it seemed normal and natural to have those conversations. And then what was great is that we had over the course of the first maybe 12 months, we had difficult situations because we were traveling around the world together. So we were annoying each other, you know, with travel logistics and hotel bookings and planes and all this sort of stuff. But we seemed to manage to work it out. We ended up having a few fights, and the way that we resolved the fights worked out that we ended up stronger as a result of our fights rather than weaker as a result of our fights. So the things that we've got frustrated about, our communication style. So I'm like, okay, this is someone I can really work with. And you know, when we disagree on stuff, that's great. I think one of the biggest things for me is I really noticed that we're effective and productive after a disagreement. It's very easy to be happy about things going well. You know, if all things are rosy, especially in those first 6 months when everything's rosy, it's easy to get lulled into a false sense of this works. But actually, you know, what you really want is to find someone who you can disagree with well. You can lock horns, and actually both of you are strengthened through that process. So yeah, does that answer the question, or I'm rambling a bit?
No, it does break it down a lot. I wanted the audience to really understand that I personally believe, and then you tell me if this is true, that a lot of your success and monetary success and success in every area of your life has probably been propelled by having the right woman behind you. I think it's got better since the relationship.
Totally,
right?
Yeah. Everything went up a level having Elena. Yeah, like totally. We live in our dream house because of Elena, and we've got our kids, you know, and like all of that stuff. It's all like because of that partnership. It's not. None of that stuff would have happened if we weren't in that relationship. She hasn't come in and hopped on my coattails. We've created something together.
So it's important then for a man or a woman to pick someone that they can build with.
Well, if you just zoom out from a relationship and just talk about successful entrepreneurs, you always see the CEO or the founder, but actually it's the CFO, the COO, the CTO, the CMO that are actually making that thing tick. The CEO gets all the credit. Look, I've watched some of the content that you probably have come across as well, and it's all of this really ridiculous polarity of like, you know, becoming this kind of guy who's got tens of millions and then finding, you know, someone who's a complete blank slate type thing. And I think the perfect scenario, I think, for me, is very similar to a CEO and a COO. You've got someone who is a bit more out there and the visionary, and you've got someone who's really good at getting stuff done, and it's that chemistry between the two that kind of works. But I don't think the CEO and the junior are necessarily the right business partners. You know, I've seen some of the content really kind of paints that picture of like, you know, it's someone up here and someone down here, and it's like, to me, that I don't think that necessarily is ideal.
There's a lot of red and blue pill content on relationships and how relationships should be, and you know, you should date multiple women, or women should date multiple men, and all these different stratospheres that people go down. But I just think that when I think about all the top people I've interviewed, entrepreneurial wise and in life, and all the people that I've spoken to off the podcast that I know are successful, it's like there's a commonality between them getting their relationship right and getting set within their relationship so they can go out and pursue their greatest self.
And it frees up so much energy. Like if you get the right relationship, now you've got the energy. Because as a guy, if you don't have the right relationship, so much of your attention, whether you like it or not, is focused on finding people. Right?
100%.
You can't focus on one thing because this other thing is just always in the back of your mind. So yeah, it frees up a huge amount of energy and creativity. Gives you that kind of stability.
Because a male brain is archaic, isn't it? We want success, we want entrepreneurship, we want money and all that stuff, which we do. But then we also like shiny objects as well. Yeah. You know, we don't want to be pursuing too many shiny objects because that takes us away from the core skill.
We actually really biologically, we only have two objectives: survive and reproduce.
Yeah.
Right. So survive and reproduce is do things that represent survival or the ability to survive, and do things that represent reproduction. And essentially, those are the two goals. If you actually think about biologically, everything in our brain and our nervous system is built to optimize those two outcomes. When someone's single for too long, they're really going all in on survival. They're focused on like cars and houses and money and all of that, which is the survival stuff that feels good. But they're not actually doing the second thing we're designing to do. So it's kind of like if you went to the gym and only did the left side workout and you've got really strong left arm and really strong left leg, but you've not built the right and the right arm.
So there's no balance there, yeah.
Yeah, and you're just neglecting a whole half of yourself.
Yeah.
So essentially, you know, we're kind of designed to unlock this whole other board game once we get into this.
You know a lot of successful people that haven't had relationships as well, or don't have partners. But when you speak to them, do you see a little bit of a emptiness in a lot of respects to them?
Yeah, it's exactly that. There's one half of the life that is extremely well developed, but there's this other half that's missing. And it's very hard to know you're missing out on something if, you know, especially too, when you talk to parents just complain all the time about how hard it is to have kids and how you don't get to, you know, do all the fun, free things and all that sort of stuff. And the same when you're in a relationship. Married people tend to joke about,
don't get married.
Yeah, there's a lot. Well, at the very top end, no one jokes about don't get married. Like it's funny. The don't get married, don't have kids thing doesn't exist at the top end of town. They all get married and they all have kids. If you go to billionaire families and family offices and all this sort of stuff, they're all getting married in their 20s. They're all having kids in their 20s. Like they're all, they're not doing any of the don't get, and especially the family.
It's very traditional at that end of town.
They never joke about don't get married, don't have kids. It's no, you're getting married and you're having kids. That's like a cornerstone objective. There's a reason for that, right? They're not silly up there. So they know how life works. So it's extreme. It's the closest thing to religion at the top end of town that you get married and have kids.
Yeah. And it protects a lot. It protects the generational wealth of the family, and that's why they do it. And they have to have lineage to be able to pass that down effectively.
They also know how to do it properly. They discuss values. They discuss the family, what the family vision is and what the family mission is, and they really do it properly. They don't leave it to chance. They have family retreats. They have family. They have like a way of discussing disagreements. They're really clean with their communication. They're very clean with like roles and responsibilities and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and expectations, they set them clean out at the start.
Exactly. So they know how to do it properly, and that's something that we can all learn. That doesn't require billions of dollars. It's just a way of conducting.
At the end of town that you're talking about, it's actually frowned upon to be a single woman at 30 at that end of town. Like when you think about it, in those families,
or too much of a playboy as well. Either. But both.
And what we're talking about here is the top 5% of families that we're talking about here, which are the families that have the generational wealth that pass it down 4 to 12 generations.
And the higher up you go, the more intense it is.
Yeah.
So it's the top 0.001% of families. They're very focused.
Very locked in on it.
Yeah, and they're almost as locked in on this as they are on the money preservation. They the way that the family runs is probably just as focused as the way the business runs.
Yeah. And so you set your roles out clear from the start that I'm the visionary, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to create the wealth, going to create everything else. And you
mean with my wife?
Yeah, with your wife. You want her to be the mum and look after the children and do all that.
More to it than that, she's very good at wealth preservation. So Elena has, built properties and, she will buy a very rundown property and she'll turn it into something that's worth a lot more, and she'll manage that whole process. I run all key decisions past her as well. She's got an amazing tuning fork for don't be in business with that person. I get a bad vibe around that person, and she's never wrong. There's never, ever been a situation where she said that person is going to be a pain in the ass.
So she becomes one of your 24 assets.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, discerns it. Yeah. The last thing I wanted to wrap up with you with today is AI and how people can use AI this year to make, a dent in what they're trying to achieve and what they're trying to do, and how they can use it to serve them. Because I find that people are either using it or playing with it at a small level, or they're not using it at all, which is 80% of the people out there in a minute. So, and people like me and you are out there exploring about the full capabilities of this, and even we're not scratching the surface. So how can people start to scratch the surface with AI and use it for their benefit?
Well, every single person who'd be listening to this podcast is interacting with AI all day. So when you're on Spotify and it's suggesting a song, that's AI. When you're looking at YouTube and it's telling you what video to watch next, that's AI. We're constantly engaging with AI stuff. Most news websites are full of AI-generated articles now, and have been for years, by the way. Like Bloomberg has been mostly 80% AI-generated content for years. So we're all consuming AI stuff. We're all being recommended stuff by AI, Amazon and Spotify and Instagram and TikTok, right? All of that is impacting you with AI. So it's a very simple game. You can't avoid AI, but AI will either turn you into a hyper consumer or a hyper creator. So the goal is to make a choice. Do I want to be at the effect of AI where it turns me into a hyper consumer, that it just sells me stuff all day long and it, my whole brain is like manipulated by AI, and it's just forcing me down rabbit holes without me knowing it, and it's getting me to buy stuff, that I didn't really intend on buying. Like, do I want to be in the consumer camp, which is going to be about 95% of people, or do I want to be one of the 5% of people who uses AI to be a hyper creator, and I use it to learn faster, create faster, impact more people, get my message out to more people? So once you make that decision, then you end up going down a different AI path, and you go and you actually figure out, oh, okay, here's how to collaborate with it. Here's how to use it in a product. Here's how to develop something that is an AI tool. Here's how to use AI and program AI to give me the more of the stuff that I actually want, as opposed to just randomly receiving. So the first thing is to say, do I want to be a creator or a consumer? And I have a very strong opinion that you want to be a creator. I think what's going to happen in the next decade is we're going to have a small group of people who go off on the creator journey and they become worth tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions. And then you have a vast majority of people who go down the consumer journey and their value is just eroded and eroded and eroded until such time as they're replaced by AI for productivity purposes, and their only value is being a consumer, a blob in the masses. And that's really, AI really has the potential to just polarize society. So I if unchecked, we are heading towards a two-speed economy. Those who use AI to create and those who are used by AI to consume, and a vast chasm in the middle. Imagine, for example, that we're all running a marathon and then some people decide that they're going to put on some goggles that distract them, and some people decide to hop into a Lamborghini and drive instead of walk or run, right? The difference between where those people end up at the end of an hour is vastly different.
Vastly different, yeah.
Yeah.
I think any of you listening to this that just start experimenting with all the AIs out there and start to see how you can use them. And if you're in a job, start to see how you can use AI to further your job whilst you're also learning this. So you're saving yourself time whilst, and businesses time whilst you're producing as well. I think that's the best way to approach it.
There was a time where search engines, I'm old enough to remember when search engines were not mainstream. And there was a time where saying, have you Googled it, was like a real kind of youth orientated thing to say to an older person, where they're like, oh, I wonder what the answer to this. And you'd say, well, have you Googled it? Have you Googled the answer? So the new have you Googled it is, have you asked ChatGPT? Have you discussed this with an AI?
Yeah.
And you need to recognize that you now need to say, every idea that crosses your path, talk to AI about it. So if you've got a complicated email that comes into your inbox and you're just like, oh, I'm not sure about this email, how would I respond? Ask the AI how to respond to that email.
Give me 3 ways to respond to this email that makes the client feel understood, but also allows me to get to this point across. It's exactly. You become a prompt engineer. The more you can engineer your prompt, and
everyone's got to be a prompt engineer.
Yeah, everyone's got to refine their prompt engineering, refine how they speak. This is where writing's so powerful.
You can say, I'm not good at prompt engineering. Ask the AI, how do I improve at prompt engineering? It'll tell you. Get good at tell the AI your goals. Say, I really want to achieve this. Give me some strategies. Give me some plans, right? And don't expect the AI to give you a finished result. The AI is almost like a friend who's read every book, but is like it's read some good stuff and some bad stuff. It's kind of like if it was a baker, it's good at baking sponge cake, but you've got to ice the cake. Yeah. You've got to kind of put your spin on it in order for it to be valuable. So the goal here is that you want to start getting good at just interacting with AI.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's so powerful if you all just take it on for what it is and just start to use it in different parts of your life and ask it questions. I'm sure you're going to get some unbelievable answers out of it that are going to even baffle you. But Daniel, unbelievable scenes today with this podcast. I think we've unlocked a lot of doors for a lot of people, but there's one question I love to ask, and I've asked you this before, and hopefully we get a different answer today. But if there's one thing that you could just leave this audience that's going to move them forward today with your experience on the planet and move them forward at 1%, what would that be to you? We
talked about today this idea of Reptile, autopilot, visionary. So I recently did this podcast with Stephen Bartlett on Diary of a CEO. 500,000 people in the first 3 days watched it. About 900 comments came through. And it's really interesting. You can actually just see Reptile, autopilot, visionary same piece of content, and you get a comment, this won't work for me because I don't believe that this is true. Rather than asking a question or anything like that, it's just Reptile comment. Autopilot comment, this was good. Type thing. Visionary comment, I've had so many new ideas, I'm going to go put those into place. I've action those. So here's an interesting one. I just want, like, that. What I find fascinating about that is the same piece of content hit people with eyes, ears, and brains, and the way they filtered that content was either this is really negative and makes me angry, or this was really inspiring and it makes me inspired. And it's funny, we've all got the hardwire in there, as in we can all be a reptile, an autopilot, or a visionary. All of us have got the software and the hardware for being that. So the thing that will move you more than anything else is getting a clear understanding of right this minute, am I in reptile mode? Am I in autopilot mode? Am I in visionary mode? And what do I need to do to move out of these two and into this one? So it's like, okay, I'm spending a lot of time in reptile mode, and that's not gonna make my life better, right? I need to stop doing that. What do I need to do? You might say, okay, in order to stop being a reptile mode, I need to have a cash buffer. I need $2,000 or $3,000 in the bank. So then sell whatever you need to sell, do what you need to do, and get the cash buffer and put it in a separate account if that gets you out of there. Or you might say, I need to have a daily dose of inspiration. We'll find the daily dose of inspiration and just get there. I need to do some gratitude journaling. Okay, it might seem naff to the reptile, but it's what the visionary needs. So just do it. I need to get around some people. Okay, fine. Enroll yourself into an entrepreneur group and start hanging out with some entrepreneurs to lift you up. Do whatever you can to recognize what mode you're in and just move up that tree, because ultimately nothing happens when you're in autopilot mode, or if you're in reptile mode. There is nothing. I can give you the strategies. I could give you a step-by-step 25-point plan. Do this, then this, then this, then this. Reptile will go, you're an asshole, you're trying to trick me. Autopilot will go, oh, I've never done any of that before, so I just won't do it. Visionary will go, oh my goodness, how come you didn't charge me $1 million for this? This is gold, right?
Yeah.
And
how's this free? Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So the same checklist will be seen completely differently. So you have to just say, objectively, I'm not going to end up with the life that I want if I'm spending too much time in these unproductive states. I've got to find my strategy, my way of connecting with my visionary, and just spend more time in that visionary mode. And ultimately, you want to spend all your time in the visionary mode. That's where everything kind of happens. So that would be what I'd say.
I love it, and that's powerful.
What did I say last time?
Do you know what? You're putting me on the spot here.
We'll have to find out.
You know what? You can click the link under this video and you can find out what he said last time. But guys, I really appreciate every single one of you listening and tuning into this podcast. If this one with Daniel's hit your ears at the right time, I would encourage every single one of you, because 95% of my audience on YouTube, all of you, there's like 400,000 of you that are not hit that subscribe button. And I'd appreciate another 5-10% of you today just hitting that subscribe button and giving it some love. I appreciate every single one of you. And Daniel Priestley, thank you very much.
Cheers. Thank you.
Guys, do me a solid favor. Drop a comment below this video and let us know who you want on the podcast next.